welcome to our kitchen. I'm Mel, East Belleville, and my wife calls me the Everywhere Cook because as you can see, when I cook, there's food and ingredients everywhere. Today we're going to talk about quick breads, and one particular quick bread that I like is called Jalapeno-Cheese Cornbread. The recipe will be at the end of the video, and it's a pretty easy bread. However, there are a few things you have to know before you get into using hot peppers. Hot peppers that I'll be using are jalapenos. These are about 5,000 on a Scoville heat unit. Scoville heat units measure everything compared to a green pepper, a sweet green pepper, which is 1. So if you wish, this thing is 5,000 times more hot than a green pepper. This guy, that's called a Thai bird pepper, and it's really hot. The Thai bird pepper is 150,000. So if you want, it's 30 times hotter than the jalapeno and 150,000 times hotter than a sweet green pepper. We won't be using those today, but the way you prepare Thai green peppers or serrano peppers or the gray ghosts is the same way as what I'm going to show you. First of all, I like to pick my own jalapeno peppers from the supermarket. I don't like to buy packaged ones because you get damaged peppers. Look for shiny skin, no blemishes. Second of all, they're very hot. And I can attest to the problems of having pepper sauce, pepper juice, hot pepper juice on your fingers. Imagine doing this and touching your eye. There's virtually no way to get the pain out of your eye, not even milk. You just have to cry. And that's easy compared to what would happen if you got it on your private parts. Anyway, you take your pepper, and making sure that your knife is a nice straight edge. This simply straightens the edge, it doesn't really sharpen it. You take and you cut it, you pick off the stems, cut it in half, and then with your knife, from the flower end, just trim down the sides of the skin. You're trying to get the pith and the seeds out without cutting yourself. The other thing to do is to watch these things, because they're fresh, they squirt. So I like to work with a spoon. This is a grapefruit spoon for eating grapefruit. It's the same size as a tea, but it has a serrated edge, and that's easier to cut through the membrane. So sort of stand back or wear a pair of glasses, and it comes out just as easy as that. The heat in the pepper really is with the pith, the membrane, and the seeds. So we want heat, but not so hot that it offends your guests. So there you go. Your pepper is now de-seeded. So what I simply do is julienne it in very, very small chunks. You'll notice that I've put a glove on so that I can actually touch the pepper. And it's important to touch the pepper. If you don't have a glove, then a more difficult way is to take a fork, and with your fork, hold the pepper and then just slice. And you can see that it can be done in a very efficient way, and one that won't result in pain. Now, you simply put that in the thing and then chop. Making sure you make a claw can see the peppers flying everywhere. That's why my wife calls me an everywhere cook. And there we go. We have a very fine dice. Now, I prepared in advance for this video taping, so I actually did my peppers in a food processor. However, if you don't have a food processor, you need to know how to do this. You'd still have to wear a glove, you'd still have to de-seed it, but it's a lot easier. In a food processor, to make a half a cup of jalapeno peppers, you're going to need 4 peppers, 4 or 5 peppers about that size. So there you go. There we have our half cup. This, by the way, is an anchor. You should always anchor your boards when you're using them. This is just a wet dishcloth, and it just stops the board from slipping. Our ingredients, I've prepared them in advance. However, here is the half cup of diced green jalapenos. We have 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 1/3 tablespoons of baking powder. I get confused because we use baking soda also. That's your leavening agent. Baking powder is actually made up of baking soda plus cream of tartar, which comes from a baobab tree in Africa, and usually they put in cornstarch to extend it. Don't buy the stuff that has aluminum sulfate in if you're against aluminum in your meals. 2 eggs that have been out at room temperature, 1 1/2 cup of sugar, white sugar, 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, and 1 1/4 cups of medium cornmeal. Now, for people who are gluten intolerant, you can substitute the all-purpose flour for a gluten-free all-purpose flour, or you can do a combination of rice flour, potato flour, even tapioca to get your dimensions, because the gluten is really not important in a quick bread. The quick bread is more like a cake. We're forming a batter rather than a dough. And the joy of quick breads is that it'll take about 2 hours from beginning to end here, whereas if you were baking bread, it'd take you the better part of the morning, or maybe half or 3/4 of a day. So the other thing is that it's relatively cheap, and it doesn't depend on the weather like bread does. When you're making bread, humidity, even the air pressure has an impact on your dough. With a quick bread, it's basically impervious to temperature, pressure, or any other conditions. We have a 1/4 cup of, I use just regular vegetable oil. I prefer vegetable oil because it doesn't have a flavor, but you can substitute that for any kind of oil that you wish. 1 1/2 cups of, I'm using skim milk, but you can use whole milk. You can substitute it for rice milk or almond milk. Any of those will work. The other thing that we have is cheese. And the cheese I'd like to do today, just to show you something. This cheese is cheddar cheese. It's 34% milk fat. I prefer orange cheddar because it gives a nice color. Can you see okay? I've already begun to grate it. I use a box grater, use the coarse side of the box grater, and this is what I want to show you with your cheese. If you leave the cheese in the package, you can actually save your fingers from contaminating the cheese, but more importantly, it saves the wrapper for another time. So you hold and also get your fingers out of the way of the grater. There's nothing worse than finding a fingernail in grated cheese. Kind of makes you think what else you might find. So we're going to do 1 1/2 cups of orange cheddar cheese. This is old cheddar cheese, purchased at a local store. If you want, you can substitute your cheese. You could have smoked Gouda. Any of the cheeses will work. And the other thing I neglected to tell you is that unlike making bread from dough, your quantities are less important. If you're out by a gram, if you're out by a quarter of a teaspoon, it's not going to make very much difference to your product. So that's another advantage of quick breads. So we now have 1.5 cups of cheese. I know the measurement because I've done this so many times. I should have told you that quick breads originated in North America, probably with the Aboriginal people, the indigenous people, because it uses corn. It's a very favorite quick bread up and down North America, including the islands of the Caribbean. It's also known by many other names. Johnny cake is what my mother used to make. Johnny really is short for journey cake. My mother made it in such a way that the cornmeal was so coarse it used to cut the top of my mouth, and I really didn't like eating it, even though we had it with maple syrup. This recipe overcomes that problem because you will see that we let it rest for 1 hour so that the milk is absorbed into the cornmeal and therefore provides a soft texture and a very, very delicious product. So let's get on with it. The food preparation is pretty easy. Put all your dry ingredients together. So we have our cornmeal, we have our all-purpose flour, we have our sugar, we have our baking powder, make sure you shake it around, and we have our salt. Now, I like to fluff up my flours, and we have to mix it anyway. So here's what I do. I take a regular whisk and just turn my bowl while I'm whisking so that all the ingredients are incorporated and any small bumps, lumps are broken down. Lumps are not a bad thing in a batter. They're not a good thing either, but it's not going to destroy your product. They'll disappear in the 1 hour that it takes to soak the batter. There we go. The dry ingredients are done. Now, for the wet ingredients, again saving dishwashing and cleaning up, I like to do everything in one measuring cup. This is a 4-cup measuring cup. Normally what I would do is I would put in my milk first, just right out of the, this has been measured so I know it's 1.5 cups. This has been measured. That's my oil. And oil kind of sticks, so being an everywhere cook, I like to scrape it out. Also, most of my experience has been cooking in large quantities in soup kitchens, where it's very, very important to keep track of your ingredients and use everything you can. Okay, so I've got 2 eggs that have been out at room temperature for, well, probably an hour, I guess now. I do them separately in a separate bowl so that there's no chance of getting eggshells in the main bowl. There we go. And that's it. Get out as much of the white as we can. So I use a stick blender and just blend it until all the eggs are broken down. You can tell by the color. Okay, so now I have incorporated my wet ingredients together, and so what's necessary is to put the wet ingredients in with the dry ingredients, and that's a pretty simple task. With a wooden spoon, make a hole in the middle, add your wet ingredients a bit at a time, And you'll notice I'm turning the bowl. That just makes sure that I get all the dry ingredients off the sides and get them exposed to the liquid. The Johnny cake that I was discussing earlier used to be made in the early days in the 1800s because it didn't really have to be preserved in any way, except it just don't get it wet. But if you could keep it dry, it pretty well lasted forever. When you get really old Johnny cake, you just crumble it up and you make it into dressing for poultry. Okay, and this is where you want to be certain that you get as much of the dry ingredients exposed to the liquid ingredient as possible. You can see, actually you can see bubbles forming, which is carbon dioxide, because the baking powder, the acid in the baking powder, which is the cream of tartar, is reacting with the baking soda and causing carbon dioxide. So there we go. Now you put in your cheese. Cheese and your peppers. And mix that to ensure that you have everything incorporated. You'll notice I have a little bit of liquid left. I just reserved that in the event that a big lump comes in at the end that I didn't force into the batter. What I'm trying to do here is to break up the clumps of cheese so that they're evenly distributed in the batter. And you can see when I do it, I do 0, 8, 8, 0, 0, 8, and then fold it a couple of times. And that way you pretty well expose your ingredients and measure and distribute them evenly. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I like these square pans because they fit in my refrigerator better. So I've got the batter into the pan. It's now going to rest for an hour. You can rest it on the table, rest it in the refrigerator, wherever you like. All you have to do is cover it. And because of my background with soup kitchens, I like to get everything out because the ingredients are very important to somebody. So there we go. Put a little cover on it. Probably a teaspoon of batter that's stuck on your spoon. That teaspoon turns into about 1.5 teaspoons of Johnny cake, which is about 1 bite. And if you got a limited amount of product to feed a lot of people, every teaspoon counts. So that's why we try to use everything that's possible. Okay, so it's covered. Put it in the fridge for an hour, and then we'll get on with making. So I have my batter now. The next step is to put this into a frying pan. Now, it's sat long enough that I know that the cornmeal has absorbed all the moisture. So the meal itself is going to be very soft. However, I like to have a crust on the outside. And so to get a crust, I recommend any kind of a cast iron frying pan or Creuset Dutch oven. This works better because it has low sides. It's a 10-inch pan, and I know that it'll take all of my batter, and in 32 minutes I'll have a product. However, when you're baking, you have to move the frying pan, because most of your ovens have hot spots. So you should know your oven well enough to know where the hot spots are. But because of that, around the edge, you'll get, it'll cook faster, it'll bake faster than the center. So what you do is make yourself a little cover, and you do it before you put your batter in, because your frying pan is cool and you can hold it. If you don't do this until your frying pan is hot, well, let me tell you, it's a bit of a challenge. So what we do, I've measured it off. We're just going to cut out a little bit of the middle. Cut it away from your cooking area because you don't want to get tinfoil in your food. And there you go. That'll be the cover that I put on at about minute 25, just to stop the edges from burning. Okay, so my pan is dry. Doesn't need to be greased or anything. You simply take your batter, get it into your pan. You've got your oven already preheated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're going to bake it on the middle shelf. There we go. So just to get any voids will be removed by just dropping it like that. So we put this into a 375 oven, and we're going to cook it for 25 minutes. And we'll move it around at about the 15-minute mark. At 25 minutes, we'll take it out. We'll put the cover on. We'll check to see if it's done with a tester, and that'll be that. All right, so about 20 minutes have elapsed, so I'm going to just check it, make sure it's not burnt. I've turned it once, so I'm going to take it out and see that it's just about ready. So I'm going to put my cover on that we made earlier, just to make sure that the edges don't burn. And this is why I said it's important to do the cutting and trimming of your cover before, because this is a really, really hot frying pan. The frying pan, as you'll recall, gives us a nice crust. So there we go. This is the product that you will produce. This is a Jalapeno-Cheese Cornbread. This will make about 16 servings. It's a great thing to take to a potluck. It goes really, really well with chili or stew or fried chicken. You can serve it as an appetizer even. But anyway, this is what it looks like. And there you go. Jalapeno-Cheese Cornbread. I like to keep my peppers wrapped up individually in kitchen paper here. The reason for that is it extends the life. When you get these peppers, for example, you should probably use them within a very few days, because they start to get all shriveled up and they lose their attractiveness. However, it's still a worthwhile product if you're baking it like this. It wouldn't be much good if you were putting it in a salad. But you realize that I had these peppers left over. So there's a number of things I can do. One thing, I could turn this into poppers. Jalapeno poppers are really, really good. You take half cream cheese, half cheddar cheese, grate it together, clean out the pepper, leaving the end on, and fill it up, and then cover it with crumbs. Put a little bit of oil on top, put it in a baking tray, and bake it for about 15 minutes or until you get the right color at about a 350 temperature. And they're delicious little hors d'oeuvres. Another thing you can do is you can take your peppers that are cut. Now, you didn't see my how much peppers I did have already prepared. But after this taping, I don't intend to make any more jalapeno cheese cornbread. But what I'll do is I'll take those peppers and I'll get a little plastic bag, measuring out maybe 2 tablespoons, because that's about what I would use in a soup. So I just take out 2 tablespoons, put them into the bag, and there you go. Freeze that up and you have pre-chopped, pre-diced green jalapeno peppers. Another way you can do it is to take and put them in ice cube trays. And you put maybe, I have large ice cube trays, so I maybe put in a tablespoon in per ice cube, then put water in it and freeze it. And then you have a bag of frozen delight. These guys here, these are going to be used to make a condiment. It's called Nuoc Cham. It's from Cambodia and Vietnam. And it's made with these things and garlic and fish sauce. It's just delicious and it's very addictive. How do you keep the cornbread? Well, this cornbread is going to be eaten, obviously. But if it wasn't, if it was still together, I would take that whole thing and put it in a bag, a plastic bag that would fit, and simply put it in the freezer. And it'll keep for 3 or 4 months. If you have the luxury of a whole lot of different size, this is a cast iron croissant. This will make half that batch. So I have 2 of them actually, so I can make 2 small ones. And these are ideal if you are taking it to shut-ins, you know, people who are living by themselves and who probably wouldn't eat a whole cornbread easily, but they can eat a half one. So you can freeze it. This one will be kept in the refrigerator in a plastic bag as we eat it, just to keep it fresh. To freshen it up, you could put it in the oven in a brown paper bag, just wet the paper bag. Put it in the oven at about 225 for maybe 10 minutes and it'll soften up. At the very end, if you're left with a whole bunch of really hard bits, just put it in a food processor, blend it very coarsely, and use it for stuffing in poultry. It's a great stuffing. Nothing gets thrown out in this kitchen. I neglected to show you how to test. So the test is to use a toothpick, and I go through a lot of toothpicks and they're hard to come by because they're all over the place. I have a food tester. It's just made with a stainless steel wire. I carved a little top for it, and you simply insert it into the middle of the cake or the bread, pull it out, and if it's clean, see how shiny it is, so it is clean, then it's cooked. If it comes out and there's a little bit of dullness and you can feel it's wet, well then put it back in the oven for another 5 minutes. So there's my demonstration on jalapeno cheese cornbread, a quick bread, a bread that's very delicious, and one that I hope you'll enjoy. Please come back again.